Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. My name is Kelly Echevarria. I'm the county emergency manager. I'm so glad to see so many of you here today, joining us to gather knowledge and information for your toolbox and take care of yourselves, learn more about insurance in the great state of Nevada. I want to say thank you to my coworker, Candy, wherever she is, in the back with Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Clark, good to see you. Commissioner Garcia, thank you for being here. Um, you all don't know this, and it might not matter to you, but Candy put a ton of work into making this happen tonight. And so if you leave here with just one nugget of something good, you have Candy to thank for that. I am just a mouthpiece. So, um, thank you again for being here. I think the more we all learn about insurance, the more resilient we'll become as a community. At least that's my hope and dream, and I hope you share in that with me. I am going to introduce both of our speakers just as an overview for how tonight's going to go. I'll introduce one, Brett Taylor with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. Then I will introduce Insurance Commissioner Gaines. Um, then we'll do a Q&A here in the room first before going online, and we will be done by 7 p.m. tonight. If we get close to that deadline or go over, my children in the back will let me know. They are my alarm clock. So there they are. Yes, hello. So we're gonna cut it off at 7, and then we have a process for if your question didn't get answered or you want to submit it separately. That's something that you can do. Okay. All right. Well, that being said, I will introduce one of my favorite partners, and I'm not saying that because he's standing here, but Brett Taylor with Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District.
Good evening. So I have a captive audience. Fortunately, you're here to talk about wildfire insurance, and you all get to listen to me for about 15 minutes on why we're here, why we have to talk about wildfire insurance, why it's an issue in the state, really in the county as well. And so, fortunately, this is a problem that we can all fix. We are obviously we have to figure out the why, and so I want to make sure we frame that problem, where how we got here, because what just didn't happen overnight that insurance decided to, pull back or change regulations. Like that didn't happen overnight. So I want to make sure that we're framed correctly. If you can pull up that first slide, and understand why wildfire here in Nevada is the way it is. It didn't happen overnight at all. Like I said, we got here through a few different things. A lot of it, poor landscape management, poor stewardship of our environment. Our ecosystems have evolved to be fire adapted. We have over millennia, our trees and plants have all in Nevada really adapted and evolved to live with fire, unlike us. We have evolved, we have grown into areas that have lived with fire forever. And now these areas, when we're here and now being impacted by these larger, more catastrophic fires, we end up paying the price in suppression costs, in homeowners insurance costs, in loss of our property, our homes. And so that's really the crux of the situation is why are these things happening? I want to make sure that we understand that fire will always happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Across our county, we are going to see another fire, and more than likely, it's going to be a big fire. Every 3 to 5 years, we will have one. Usually, just by the numbers of my 20-year career, somewhere along the Sierra Front that will impact a community. We just saw one a couple of years ago, and so that fact should drive us all to make our own mitigations, our own actions to harden ourselves against that possibility. Might not happen in your lifetime, but it might happen next year. So personally, I don't like to gamble with those odds. So I think all of you don't want to gamble with your life's work and your property, your life's investment of home. And so there's things that we can do to mitigate that risk down. Make sure you can go next slide. Next slide, one more. Sorry, it's small. These are some things that the unchangeable factors that we should all be aware of. We should all talk about with our neighbors throughout the fire season or fire year as we get now. We need to look at these unchangeable factors that really influence fire behavior and how it interacts around our property. And so the weather is obviously a big driver. Winds, humidities, temperatures, all of that are really unchangeable things that are going to increase that fire behavior throughout the summer. And it's going to drive fire, depending on your location around your position of your home, around your landscape. It's going to depend on how intense that fire is going to be if or when it gets to your house. So those things we should always be talking about. We should always be kind of considering in the back of our mind. And then there's the things on the forefront. You can go next slide. The things that we can change. These are the common sense mitigations that I want you to I can't have enough time to go over all this. And so really dive in and understand there's things that we can do to fix our home. It's called home hardening. And there's things we can do to fix our defensible space. Those shouldn't be new terms to anybody. And it should be kind of in the constant conversation with you and your neighbors. But there's a lot of resources out there that inform us on how, and this is all derived in science, that from all the disastrous fires we've learned what are good mitigation actions, what are just good ways to harden our home, to improve our defensible space so we are not as impacted by a fire. We should have much more peace of mind when we are evacuating to get out of the smoke, and there might be embers and things flying in. But if we've done these mitigation actions, we don't have to worry about it as much. There's still a possibility. I'm not going to say there's zero risk, but if you do this, there is a negligible risk to your property, depending on where you are. Obviously, we moved to these really nice, beautiful areas of northern Nevada. That increases your risk. The more trees you have on your property, the more risk you have. But there are definitely management practices that we endorse, the protection district, but all of our land management agencies, that we want people to take advantage of, a lot of materials take advantage of, to understand that we can reduce these things down. So really quick, that's a snapshot of your home. Thank you, Living with Fire, for all of the fantastic graphics and information. But there's all these key points that we know are that have infected houses in fires throughout, California, throughout the West. And there's these characteristics that we like to see in our home, but they might not be the best for fires when they approach. And so a couple just really key ones that I want people to clue into are vents, vents that have the ability for larger embers to enter your attic or your crawl space. Those vents are just common intrusion pathways for embers, that's how a fire travels. It's not a wall of flame. It is usually embers ahead of a main flaming front that land and ignite in flammable material, bushes, patches of leaves next to your siding, attics. That's what usually ignites houses. It's not usually the timber or the wall of fire that's engulfing everything. That's not the case. I want to make sure we understand that it's usually small, localized bushes, junipers, things that are combustible material that's around our home that we love to see 99% of the time, but then that's the thing that catches our house on fire. So that's really what I want to get across, is that if you're changing out the defensible space, that's half the battle. The other 50% of the time, the other half of the battle is your home, is how to reduce the ignitability of your home. And so again, more information in the back, in the lobby. There's guides on how to retrofit your home, how to make it more hardened. So I won't take up too much time with that. Can you go next slide? And so there's just a few more examples of areas, again, the areas of kind of good mitigation, but also places of vulnerability. So that's a good change with new Washoe County Building Code, the 2024 WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface, the code behind building modification and home construction. To be more hardened, we've changed things to have enclosed soffits, to have tighter screened mesh. On all new construction or modified construction, you have to do these things now. What we hope is that folks take the responsibility and proactive nature to modify those things also. Go next slide. So then, well, obviously, the other half, defensible space. I won't quiz you on the zones. Maybe I will afterwards in the back. But the zones are important. At least I want you to recognize the first 5 feet of your home. The ember-resistant zone is that initial 5 feet around the base of your structure. That's where embers will collect. That's where things will ignite. That will then either burn into your siding, blow out a window, throw an ember into your attic. Like all of those things are very possible the more you have flammable material right next to the side of your house. So if there's anything you do in these cool winter months, it's to remove the flammable vegetation. And there's keys in the back on how to see if the vegetation is flammable or not. Generally, if it's large, woody, green vegetation year round, it's probably more flammable. And so we can kind of get into the weeds on those things, literally. But I want to make sure that that's that initial 5 feet. If we can clear that, then you've fixed a lot of your vulnerability to fire. You can kind of keep going so I don't take up the whole night. So here's just some quick mitigation actions, kind of a checklist for you in all of those zones. You can kind of see the bad kinds of the things we don't like to see whenever we walk up to a house, is that those big evergreen trees growing right into the siding. I mean, you've probably irrigated it its entire life. It's probably a nice, green plant, but what if your sprinklers go out? Now it's a drier tree. Like these are things that, it doesn't have to be this way. If that tree, you have to live without having the green there. Maybe it's privacy, but there's ways to mitigate that tree by limbing it, by removing the brush underneath, by taking it back from the side of the house. There's ways to make that plant live with fire to be, a better steward of it living around your home, so you don't have the vulnerability there. So you can go next. Zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet. That's a lean, clean, and green zone. So we don't want to say zero escape everything. We don't like that. That's not good ecology. It's not good management. But there is definitely areas we want to improve on. We want to remove that fire's pathway from the wildland or from your neighbor's yard into your yard. There's ways to mitigate that ember from landing in that spot of cheatgrass you didn't fix, and that not having a pathway into the brush right next to it, then into the limbs of the tree that's next to the house. And now that tree's torching out with 40-foot flames and a heat impact for your house. We want to make sure that pathway doesn't happen in that 30-foot zone. A lot of time you'll hear 30-foot inspections. That was a thing a long time ago, but it's still the data is there to show that in that 30 feet, if you can mitigate the fuel, the overall heat load that could come off that 30 feet, you can fix the issue. So, next one. And then zone 2 and beyond, that's really, we can increase, we can decrease, but most communities, especially when you have these overlapping zones of defensible space, usually you're getting into someone else's yard. This really speaks to the community aspect of fuels mitigation. And really what I think we all talk about a lot more is that it takes a community, you and your neighbors, to do combined fuels mitigation and defensible space so it's effective. One person does the correct thing and your neighbor doesn't, and their house catches on fire. Now the house is the fuel that could ignite your house. So we need to do that combined effect to make a community hardened against wildfire. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Just some resources I always like to point people to. These is kind of hopefully you look at them before the emergency happens, but these are the resources we really like people to, kind of prime for the summer. Washoe County Smart 911, obviously, to get signed up for alerts and to know what's happening in your area. A big tool, and you probably heard of it on watch duty and those different things as the fires or the emergencies happen. It's Perimeter, to know about evacuations and just messaging so you know what's going on around you. And then lastly, for Truckee Meadow plug, the Community Connect is a great resource for us to communicate, for you to communicate the specific hazards or issues with your property, your house, your family. So when we're responding to any emergency, not fire, we can know about what's going on and to have, if there's a dog on premise, you can tell us about it. If there's somebody has durable medical equipment, we know about it. Things like that. So really communicate with us through Community Connect. Next one. And these are some Truckee Meadows resources that we like to support. And there's obviously all funding and dependent on how the state of things are. But we like to say, we like to do this every year, is green waste. That's a fantastic resource to make sure that you have ability to get rid of the brush and weeds and things that you accumulate yearly. We know it grows back. So let us take it for free at the different green waste location sites, usually every spring and fall, budget dependent. Curbside chipping, again, very budget dependent. We like to do that, probably be in the fall this year, but that's another resource for elderly and low income that we can come to you, take the material off the curb. Not a lot of it, but we can at least get some of those limbs and brush that you've thrown on the curb. We'll take those. You have to just sign up whenever we start publishing it. Open burning is a fantastic way for you to do that work. Again, fire adapted ecosystem. We had fire and then we stopped. We started being really good at putting them out. That's kind of the wrong framing of things. We need to make sure that we're consuming that material that's constantly accumulating. Either you're taking it out by hand or you can pile it on your property and burn it safely. So go to Truckee Meadows website, learn more about open burning. Defensible space inspection is something that we'll offer either through me or one of my coworkers will come to your property, give you good, kind of an honest assessment of your property, the things you can do to mitigate that we just talked about, a little more personalized and a little bit better resource there. And then the last piece is the Firewise USA. That's the plug for how you as a community become more fire adapted and more engaged as a group of people, as a community. So it only has to be 8 homes. It could be your street. It could be the entire neighborhood. We just need a grouping of people to be engaged and wanting to report your accomplishments, your time spent in the yard. It all goes into a portal that then it just is a national recognition program that now your street has a sign that says we're a Firewise community. Insurance might recognize it. It's a good thing to do to get combined help and to get your neighbors on the same page with doing the same kind of mitigation, the things that we recommend instead of this, kind of everybody do their own thing effort. So that's all I have. I probably took up too much time, but we're ready to go. Thank you all.
Thank you, Britt. I left my giant hook at home, so you're good. Next up, we have Nevada Insurance Commissioner Ned Gaines, who will be clearing up some information and talking about recent legislation and advances in insurance. So, Commissioner Gaines.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Ned Gaines. I'm the Commissioner of Insurance with the Nevada Division of Insurance. Just to give you a little bit about me, some of you may know I am pretty new to Nevada. I've been here a whopping 10 months now. Took over as commissioner in October of last year after serving about 3.5 months as acting commissioner. Even though I'm new to Nevada, I am not new to the insurance and the insurance regulation world. I spent almost 13 years with the Washington State Office of Insurance Commissioner in a variety of roles. And then prior to that, I was in the insurance industry. So I worked for different carriers. I've been an agent, I've been a claims handler, I've been a compliance analyst. So I've touched pretty much every aspect of insurance that there is. Excuse me. So I think I'm well positioned to take on this new adventure, I guess I should call it. It's definitely been a lot of work. But I wanted to talk about several different things. First thing, I know one item that's probably on your mind is Assembly Bill 376 that was passed last session. And that is the bill that will allow insurance companies to carve out and exclude wildfire from a homeowner's policy. So I know there's been a lot of information that was put out, by media and other sources. And so I wanted to discuss that, what this bill does and what it doesn't do. So first, does allow the insurers to exclude wildfire. Good news on that is insurers can't just stop and not cover wildfire anymore. There is a process they have to go through in order to do that. And part of that process is they have to file with my office, and then we do a review. Now, if they just submit putting in an exclusion for wildfire, that's going to be a pretty simple filing and it's going to get approved. However, during my time in this realm, insurers like to couple things with their filing. So they rarely submit just a simple filing to do one thing. They always put extra stuff in there. Well, that extra stuff may keep their filing from getting approved because we look at the filing as a whole. We don't approve bits and pieces of the filing. So we're still doing a very robust review and have some oversight in this area. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and lie and say that at some point an insurer is going to file to exclude wildfire. It is going to happen. However, I've been talking with the industry and maintaining open lines there. To date, no carrier has filed to remove wildfire coverage from their homeowners policy. And from the conversations that I've had, no insurer is really interested in doing that at this time. One of the main reasons is there's no alternative. We don't have any standalone fire coverage policies. Now, we're moving forward with that. A lot of carriers, they don't want to be first, but we have had some conversations of carriers expressing interest in filing a standalone wildfire policy. So we're making movement on it. I think we have, I don't want to really put a time to it, but from my guesstimate, just knowing how the industry works, we probably have a couple of years before we start seeing insurers carving out the wildfire coverage. Now, 2 years are going to go fast. So that's why my department, coupled with the Department of, or my division, coupled with the Department of Business and Industry, we're taking a look at what can we do to move this forward, and are there options that we can take to provide that wildfire coverage to consumers. We're in the early stages of that. So that'll be an ongoing project that we're working on. But again, good news is we do have carriers that have reached out and said they're interested in having conversations with us and developing one of these products. Insurance products, unless you're in the industry, you don't realize it typically takes years for an insurer to create a new product. It's not something they can just say, oh, we're going to sell this. There's lots of actuarial work that has to go into it. Insurers want to sell policies. That's their business model. That's how they make money. But they're only going to sell it for risk that meet their underwriting requirements. And the pricing of risk is a very complicated process. So again, it's going to take several years for companies to really catch up to this law. The second thing that it does is it allows for a regulatory sandbox. Right now, if you file a homeowner's policy in Nevada, you have to meet every requirement under statute and regulation. The regulatory sandbox allows companies to file products that maybe don't meet all of the regulation or the statutes. And it allows us to still do a review of them to make sure that anything in there is not going to do consumer harm, because that's our number one goal, is not allowing consumer harm. But they can get innovative. and come up with different ideas of how they're going to provide the wildfire coverage. And let me back up just a minute and kind of give you a history of how we got here. For many, many years, there was no difference between a wildfire and a toaster fire. The way it was covered under insurance is your homeowner's policy covered fire, period. Didn't matter what the source of the fire was. As we have moved forward, though, wildfire has become such a catastrophic risk over time. As the chief was talking about, we've moved into these areas and that fire has always existed. But now we're having to deal with the consequences of when one of those fires break out. In the past, when nobody really lived there, didn't know about it. I don't know if you all know, there are hundreds of wildfires in Nevada every year, burn thousands of acres. But it's all on the Bureau of Land Management land. So it doesn't impact anybody. It doesn't burn any structures. It just burns the sagebrush. Now, I'm sure the animals that live out there aren't too happy with it, but it's not burning down anybody's property. But where we're at now is we live in this beautiful area and we love all the trees, but those are the risks. And that's what insurance companies are looking at. They also have to take a look at how much business do we have in a specific area. But again, going back to the fire. So some states have established kind of a base of fire is fire. With this AB 376, what it did, it is going to allow carriers to start looking at the wildfire risk and pricing it and writing policies that actually account for the real risk, because the risk of the wildfire is very different than, say, the risk of the fire from the toaster or risk of the fire whenever you put your Thanksgiving turkey in the fryer and it overflows and catches your backyard on fire. It is complicated. Insurance is complicated. But that's why we're here, to protect you as much as we possibly can. And that's one of the things I want you to take away from tonight is that the Division of Insurance, we are on your side and we can be an advocate for you. Our authority is, it's limited. It's based on what the legislature has given us. We don't write the law. We just enforce the law. And we don't make policy. We enforce the policy. However, there are tools in my sandbox that if you are experiencing issues, if you are non-renewed, and the reasons that you're getting from the carriers just don't add up, you can come to my office and we will work with the carrier and try to get a solution. Again, I'm not going to lie and say that we can always overturn a decision, but we have a pretty good track record because we can ask those questions. We know what questions to ask the carriers. One of the things that I'm really advocate for, if you get a non-renewal notice and it's because they're saying you have a high wildfire risk, call your carrier up or call your agent up. Ask them, did you come out and do a physical inspection of my property? If they tell you no, tell them you want one. If they say they're not going to do that, next thing, call my office, because then we can contact the carrier and tell them you need to go do a physical inspection, because if you're just relying on a model of somebody in the other side of the country created that says this particular property is a high wildfire risk, you need to go out and confirm it, because You may have taken some mitigation steps that lower your risk. We were talking about Firewise. That is something that can help lower your insurance rates. We have a number of companies that have filed that if you live in a Firewise community, they do offer discounts for that. Now, it's not every insurer. So when you're shopping around for insurance, and when I say shopping around, I mean really shop around. Best way to do that is contact a broker or an independent agent that represents multiple companies, because then they can basically do the shopping for you. They can run your risk profile through all of those companies and see what comes back. And they can usually get you a better deal. If you're dealing with a carrier that only has what we call captive agents, where their agents only represent that company, it really limits the scope of what kind of offers you can get. Because if that company says no, then you just have to keep moving. And if you continue using carriers that have captive agents, it's a long process. So the best way to go about it is using a broker. I can't stress enough how important it is, though, when you are shopping, really use a broker or an agent. Don't shop online. It's easy. Sometimes the online insurers offer better rates, but you're not getting the full service. As I said, insurance is complicated. There are a lot of things you need to think about whenever you're buying a policy. You're spending a lot of money, so you need to get the best service that you can. So having somebody who is well-versed in how the policy works and how insurance works in general, it's to your benefit. Going back to the Firewise, though, with mitigation, and you may have heard this if any of you have suffered from a non-renewal, it's that, well, I did some mitigation, but your neighbors didn't. The insurer, again, they're looking at it from the standpoint of what is the individual risk of this property? And you may have done everything you could possibly do, but every one of your neighbors is surrounded by trees. If a wildfire came through, chances are your house is going to catch on fire as well. So that's why you may be having trouble getting it. So if you can get your neighbors involved, get a Firewise community designation. Firewise is not the end all be all. I mean, it is still possible for your house to burn. However, it is a first step, and it can help you keep your insurance and get you a little bit of a discount. But we do have to start thinking about what's beyond Firewise. And there are some options out there. And the one kind of the gold standard has now become, it's what's called IBHS. It's the Institute of Business Home Safety. I recommend going to the website, looking at all the options that they have. And they give a really good list of how you can truly harden your home. That's where we need to strive. We may not get there, but we need to strive for building codes that are set at IBHS standards. It's all based on science, and the science has shown that a community that has majority IBHS standards set, they can actually stop the wildfire. And they can keep it not only saves that community, but it can save the communities downstream. So I can't stress enough, we talk about mitigation a lot, and this is the reason why. Because we're never going to eliminate wildfire, but we need to lower the risk as much as we possibly can. A couple of other items that I, do want to touch on is, shopping around. And I recommend that you shop around every couple of years. Because even though you may have been with a company for a really long time, in today's world and what the risk profiles that they're looking at, it doesn't mean anything. So don't feel loyal to your insurance company. It's basically what I'm saying. You may be able to get a better deal by shopping around, and you may be able to maintain your coverage by shopping around. Because another thing that companies are looking at, especially like if you move into a newer community, if everybody in that community goes and tries to get the same insurance from the same company, if there's a major loss, company, that's a major impact. We learned about that in the Palisades fire. And I'm not going to name company names, but there was one company that just in additional living expenses, which is what they pay you because your house is no longer habitable, they paid out over $1 billion in additional living expenses alone. That's not contents. That's not the structure. There are very few companies that can take on that kind of loss. And one of my jobs is maintaining the solvency of carriers. So when you do see rate increases, know that we're not allowing them to raise their rates because we want to. And we do a very good job of keeping the rates as low as we possibly can. We have to look at it from the actuarial terms. If they can justify why that rate is needed and everything lines up, we have to approve it because we have to make sure that when the time comes, the money is there for them to be able to pay those claims. But yeah, concentration is another thing. And that is what's driving some of the non-renewals as well, because you have insurers that over time, they've built up a large book of business in a very concentrated area. So they have to be able to pull back from some of that. And I know it's annoying. I'm dealing with it myself right now. I'm in the process of buying a house. I called up my agent. I've been renting a house and I've had renter's insurance. Thankfully, I took out the renter's insurance because after my agent ran everything through over 10 different insurance companies, the only company that was willing to insure my house is the company I'm using right now for renter's insurance. Everybody else denied it and said that it was due to a high wildfire risk. So I'm not immune to it either. I feel your pain. I understand where you're coming from. And that's why, I want to stress that we are here for you and, reach out to my office. If you have something you can write down, I want to give you my consumer services contact information. That is my complaint section. So we can always, like I said, we can check in and see what we can do to help you. But the email address that you contact is C as in cat, S as in Sam, C as in cat, C as in cat, at D as in David, O, I, dot, N as in Ned, V as in Victor, dot, GOV. So if you have a complaint, you need some help, reach out to us. We're here for you. And with that, I will turn it back over. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Gaines. I was going to say, I too almost lost my owner's insurance. And I finally was put in touch with a broker who was able to help me find high deductible insurance, but one within budget. And that is who I still use to this day. So being a millennial, I'm hesitant to call people on the phone, but it was well worth it as far as the broker goes. So I recommend that to all of you as well. I think, oh yeah. Thank you. I like to walk around. Candy has asked that I do my best. Phil Donahue, and I'll get to you all. But I want to mention a few things. So first of all, you're all taking the first step in being here tonight, and I appreciate that. But there's a really great metaphor that I first heard with Truckee Meadows fire, and then heard again today from the commissioner. So maybe y'all are hanging out too much, but it's the car metaphor of we all drive cars. It's, I assume, how most of us got here today. And we have taken driver's education, we have car insurance, we get our oil change, we do all of the things to protect our car, to protect us while we're in it. It's the same thing when it comes to our home. And we can do everything we can. We can take defensible driving and, adjust all of our mirrors, and we can still get in a car accident. That's the same thing when it comes to a wildfire. We can do defensible space and we can harden our homes, but we can still be impacted by a fire. And so insurance for our home, just like insurance for our car, is that safety net that we're all looking for. So with that being said, I have some things to say. Ms. Ramos has asked me to make a point. We want to make the best of everyone's time. So please be sure that you're asking a question and not making a statement. Please make sure that it applies to everyone and is not a nuanced issue specific to perhaps your home or property that would not benefit everyone else. Please save those for later. We will start with the people in the room and then go to the people online. And we're going to try to do one question per person until we've cleared everyone before we'll go, if we have time, to a second question. So that being said, let me start my steps. Someone over here had their hand raised, you, sir, and then I'll come over here.
Thank you. My question's for the commissioner. I'm with the Arrow Creek HOA in southern Reno. We represent about 1,100 homes. We are a fire-wise community. We're on a first-name basis with Kelly and Brett and Commissioner Clark. We were recently non-renewed, even though we're a fire-wise community. We do yearly inspections, fuel reduction grants, fuel reduction mitigations with Brett's crew. We do town halls, write magazine articles, email blasts. The whole community is involved, but now we're non-renewed, and our only 2 quotes that we've gotten so far won't cover wildfire. So where do we go from here?
Well, the first thing would be, I want the names of those carriers that are saying they're not going to cover wildfire, because we've not approved that. We have not approved a single company to carve out wildfire. And that is a requirement. They cannot just stop covering it. Yeah. So on that, and when you say are you personally non-renewed or multiple people in the community? So the association. Okay. That may be then, because that is a commercial policy. That's not, because the carve out for wildfire was allowed under the homeowners. Commercial in Nevada is deregulated. I don't have authority over them. So that being said, though, I would urge you to still file a complaint with my office. It's something, even though my regulation authority may be limited, it's still a conversation we can have with the carrier and see what we can do to help you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and welcome to Washoe County, I think. My name is Tom Daly. I'm from the Estates of Mount Rose, and I am a victim of non-renewal by travelers, despite my community having a community wildfire protection plan, a vegetation management plan, firewise designation, defensible space, and exceeding the requirements of the Wildland Code. We are the poster child for fuel reduction in Washoe County and the first CWPP in Washoe County. Fortunately, State Farm picked up the ball. So good. The problem is the risk model and the scoring criteria for the risk model is not disclosed to homeowners. I asked, they refused. I don't know if you have it or your office has it. But by regulation or legislation, you could impose a uniform risk model and scoring criteria statewide. Everybody plays under the same rules. The scoring may be different. The decision of underwriting may be different. But homeowners would know what the game is, what the criteria is, and what the scoring model is. If you don't have the regulatory authority, go to the legislature and get it. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And I do, following up on that, I mentioned that we are working on a project related to wildfire. That's, I can't go into a whole lot of detail right now, but it's something that we are looking at. And that conversation has popped up that we know that some of these scoring models that are out there that are being used by the industry, we know they're not accurate. I had actually an agent share one with me that was for Clark County, and it showed the entirety of the Las Vegas Strip as having the highest wildfire risk that there is. So we know this is an issue, and it is something that we are looking at. So, but thank you for bringing that up, because that just drives it home that, we're looking in the right direction.
So another question for you. When you talk about carriers dropping the wildfire coverage, is that on an individual policy basis, or is that their coverage across the board? So, a house up in timberline surrounded by trees versus a house in downtown Reno, the carrier's just dropping it for everyone versus the one that's at risk and the one that's not.
If they choose to not cover the wildfire risk under their homeowner's policy, they have to do it on a statewide basis. They can't do it by individual property.
Thank you for being here tonight. Don't want to hear myself talking. Thank you for being here. I'm speaking as a member of the HOA board of Woodland Village, which is about 2,000 homes in Cold Springs, that we carved out of sagebrush. So and I'm not sure of this now, but I believe in 2012 that the fire protection district re-rated those about 1,200 of those homes as not in high wildfire anymore. Now, since then, I believe they have not updated their map. So we have about 800 homes that are in very high fire risk, despite having fire hydrants and water tanks and everything. My question for you is, we think that those 800 homeowners are actually paying about $300 a month more than they should be because of the fire area, which is about $250,000 totally per year. Do you think that's a reasonable number?
I'm going to hold off on saying yes or no on that because I don't have all the information there. Now, if the risk is higher, but if it's not rated correctly, that's a whole nother issue. The insurers go off of, it's called a fire protection class, and it's based off of your proximity to a fire station, based off to your proximity to a hydrant. The closer you are, the lower you are on the scale. And it's a scale of 1 through 9. There actually is a 10 now, but 9 being the highest. And it can have a significant impact on the overall cost of premium. And it could be upwards of 300. I've seen it even go higher than that. So 300, I think, is more mid-range. But I would need more information regarding everything to see exactly what the protection class is.
I have one additional piece on the county map that a lot of time is referenced and is used within the building department, but also it's partially it's referenced on the Truckee Meadows district because it's considered a fire hazard layer. It's a fire hazard severity layer in the Washoe County regional mapping system, and something that is referenced a lot. And it's like, well, why is my house a moderate, or my parcel a moderate? Why is this one a low? And so it's something that we completely understand because that data is old. It is old data that has just not been updated recently. And so it's a project actually as we speak. The county and a group of cooperators are meeting to update a community wildfire protection plan, rather a county wildfire protection plan. In that process, we're visiting that risk mapping. It's obviously a complicated process to have a rating scale that works for not only building and planning, but also for you all as citizens of something that's understandable. We want that. It's obviously a public facing layer that needs to be understandable and have to make sense. And so the variables, the things that go into that, that's what we're currently working on to try to make that the most beneficial map for you, but also for the county, because the county uses that to decide ignition rating on all new build construction. Anything that if you go put an addition on your house, that they'll look at your parcel and decide that you need to be an ignition resistance 1 or 2 or 3, and based on that parcel severity, that hazard severity. So understand that map, we know it needs to be updated, but there's a lot of different players and pieces that go into that. And so for Cold Spring specifically, that's probably based on really old data before Cold Springs was really established. And that, it's a lot of those areas have grown out and they're now, far more urban in the core and wildland out in the outskirts. So those are things that obviously we need to revisit and with good data and good justification. So thank you.
Commissioner Gaines, good to see you again. My name is Kevin Musico. I'm an owner of an insurance brokerage. We get lots of questions about the new AB 375. 376. You just clarified about if a carrier drops the wildfire coverage, that applies statewide. They can't do it haphazardly. Do you anticipate that when you're approving a carrier to allow them to drop wildfire coverage, that we will have in the state some carrier that has a standalone policy that a consumer can go purchase to fill that gap? Is that part of the plan? Thank you.
Now, good question. And I do think we will have that before we start seeing carriers carve out the wildfire. And we have had carriers come in expressing interest in doing so. So I think that's one reason why we've not seen carriers drop it, because if they were to start doing it now, there's no alternative. And nobody wants to be in that position. The industry doesn't want to be in that position, and we certainly don't want that to be the case. So that's where again, I don't want to put a time frame to it, but knowing how long it takes for a new product to come to the market, best guesstimate probably about 2 years before we really start seeing carriers coming. Now, that being said, because this has been a developing issue, there may be carriers that have been looking at this for a while, but they've not moved forward with it because it wasn't allowed. And so we may get something a little quicker there.
Hi, my name is Lorna Weaver. I'm with Zion Builders. We are in the business of hardening homes, and we work. We're located in Sparks, Nevada, but we work in multiple jurisdictions in the state of Nevada. We're very grateful for Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District and Washoe County for approving the new WUI codes for 2024. But not all jurisdictions are enforcing those. So we're in a position of trying to educate the consumer on these products that will make your home and your property more fire safe. But we're just wondering, does the insurance industry have standards for hardening your home, just like the maps have standards for, and so that we can, tell people, hey, your county might not be enforcing this, but your insurance company may. And also, have you seen claims not be paid for not having these particular fire safe hardening on your property, on your home?
Okay, so for the first one, insurers have not created their own standards. What they're looking at is the Firewise and then IBHS. Those are what insurers like to see. Now, does that mean that's the only thing they will accept? No, but that's what they really want to see. And again, they want to see that on the community basis because that's going to lower the overall risk. To your second question, no. And if we found out that a carrier was doing something like that, we would take enforcement action against them. If you have a policy in force and you suffer a loss, regardless of whether you've done any mitigation, the carrier owes you for your loss. You have a contract with them, you are paying for that coverage, and they must pay for your loss.
Good evening. My name is Jim Cable. I appreciate you being here. I'm on the board and represent over 100 condominium owners in Incline Village. And I didn't want to move this all in that direction, but it's come up a couple times, so I think it applies to a lot of people. When these new fire ratings came about, prior to that, for our entire development, we paid less than $100,000 for our complete, very robust fire insurance policy. When this happened, and we were with American Family, single carrier. So when these new ratings came in, they immediately dropped us, and we were forced, as you alluded to, go to commercial carriers, which kind of puts us in no man's land. As you said, you have no jurisdiction over that. So we really have no one that I'm aware of that can help us at all. So we went from less than $100,000 to commercial carriers, and the best price we could get was $1.2 million for the exact same policy. So I'm sure you can imagine the angst that caused in a community. We have since fought like crazy and got that down quite a bit, and we continue to do the best we can. It's still exorbitant. We've done all the defensible space, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on defensible space at the direction of the Nevada Fire Marshal. We continue to maintain defensible space, do everything we can. So my question is there any movement in your department or any department or anything to build a bridge or do something to get people in this situation? Because there's a huge number of people in this exact same situation, to where they can get some help with the commercial carriers. And to touch on that, just when this bill came out, I immediately went to all the commercial brokers that I've been dealing with and asked them about this bill. And they said, for you on the board to approve and buy a policy without wildfire coverage would be nothing short of reckless. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a person who's on a board representing a large number of people, and you're going to say, hey, we're going to get insurance at this great price, but guess what? There's no wildfire. Well, a lot of those people might be okay with it because it saves them a lot of money. But when the place burns down to the ground, it's a little bit different story. So my reach out to you and anybody that you might know of, is there anybody trying to get a connection with the commercial side? Because we're forced to use commercial now that might represent us in some way.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. And I mean, to give my office the authority to regulate the commercial space is going to require a legislative change. Because at some point, I'm not sure exactly when that happened, commercial insurance was deregulated. So we don't even see their filings. They're not required to file anything with us. So we don't see their rates. We have some oversight. So we can advocate for you in, like, when you got your initial non-renewal. We would have been able to have some contact with American Family and seeing what we could do to help you keep the policy in force. I mean, ultimately, I can't force them to keep it, but we could at least have that dialogue. So, because they're still, even though we don't regulate their rates and we don't regulate their underwriting, we still regulate their business practices in the market. So that's something that we can take a look at. But to get full-blown regulation is going to require a legislative change. And there are a number of states that have done deregulation. There are some states that don't even require personal lines to file. It's what's called use and file, or file and use. They may have to file it, but they can start using it immediately. And then the DOI has the ability to go back at some point after they did a review, and maybe make them do some changes. Then use and file is you start using it, and then you have a certain amount of time to file it. So, we're kind of all over the place. Insurance is regulated at the state level. So every state has their own laws, has their own requirements. But that's quite a bit of a jump. And that would be one where we could help, possibly, because insurers don't like hearing from us, even if we don't have real clear-cut authority over them. They don't like us getting involved, because then we can start uncovering things. So I would recommend, if you're still having issues getting things down, excuse me, or it looks like you're going to have another non-renewal issue, something along those lines, I would urge you to reach out to us. And, we can definitely put an inquiry in and see what we can do. But I will, again, I don't make law, but I can make recommendations. Right.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Jeff. I'm also an owner of a local brokerage here. I'm curious, when the time comes to allow the insurers to take these exclusions, are these going to be new product filings, or are they filing amendments to existing contracts? And then, as a two-parter, sorry, I've probably had 75 to 100 policies non-renewed by carriers. I've advocated some of these, feels like they're just throwing darts at a wall. So if you're interested in that data, would I send that to the exact same email address or is it different from the agency side?
Different email address.
Okay.
Send that to iCommish, so the letter I, and then COMMISH at the same doi.nv.gov.
Okay, thank you.
We'd be very interested in that. Oh, the rate filing. Yeah, so the rate filing, for some carriers, it may be brand new because they may decide that they're making other changes. So then they have to submit a new filing. For others, it would be an amendment. We still consider it a new filing because they're making changes, even though it may be just be making changes to something that's existing. And they'll make reference to the filing that's already approved. But in essence, it's brand new. And again, like I said, they may try to throw something else in there. But yeah. And they would also have to, there is going to be a disclosure requirement. And we're looking at that now we're going to probably have to do a regulation on that so that we have very clear expectations for how they disclose that, especially when you're writing new business. That's one reason why we advocate for using a broker or an agent, because if you get to the point where wildfire is carved out and somebody's just going online and buying it, you don't have that advocate and that person there to say, hey, this is what you're signing and this is what you're agreeing to.
Hi there. My name is Greg Irfani. I'm the president of Tyrolean Village Homeowners Association. I'm also the gentleman that led sort of a governmental agency fire group that made 67 acres one of the most advanced, and we use technology. Some of the guys are in here that we worked with, but we spent with federal grants and everything $500,000 to make Tyrolean Village more fire safe. This gentleman here, these are the guys that got McLeod 50% less on their insurance. So there are people that insure up there. So you may want to talk to gentleman's Ryan in the black hat. My question to you though is the mandated shared wall insurance. That the policy is that an HOA must carry this for all units. And it works great for stacked units and it makes sense. But the townhouse units, because we had to transfer that from where we were individually insured to now we have to have a policy that covers everybody, 300% increase. Whereas everybody was insured before for fire, they had better insurance, they had cheaper insurance. Now we have less insurance and it costs them more. So my question to you is, can you help us correct this error in the law? Because and again, not talking about stacked units, they're townhouse units. They all were fully insured because we used also technology, Building Guard, who ensures that every homeowner in our association has their insurance and it's updated and it meets the minimum standards. So I feel like the law, although it was great and it helps Vegas kind of style, up here in Lake Tahoe, where it's the townhome style that we can't insure individually, it really has put a huge burden on many people. 300% increase in 1 year is dramatic.
When, because again, forgive me, new to the state, when did that law pass? Because
it passed in 1998. It was
Okay.
codified in 2003. We're now in 2026. So it's a 23-year-old law that now the assembly, it didn't even make it out of the conferences. So we need sort of some of an advocate for us to help us because although there's many of us, we're not loud enough to make them hear us that this is like unfair for those shared wall units.
Because that's interesting. Yes, because as a former townhouse owner, and now I was in Texas, different laws, but yeah, we had our own insurance and there was no master policy that covered the entire structure. Now I was in a condo community at once, which stacked, same thing. So I see where you're coming from on that. That iCommish email that I just gave out, send me your information so that this is something we can have a further conversation.
Of the community that the New York Times did a whole article on about how you became fire prepared. So far, 6 million people that viewed it. I've got questions from around the world. How we motivated the community to be so involved and to get beyond fire. For us, fire-wise, wasn't enough. We're the most forward. You have to be beyond fire. So, and I'll send that to the same article that you read.
Yeah, no, I have not seen that. That's great. Yeah.
Nevada Energy, everybody was at their table. And it's a really great blueprint how communities can become fire safe, fire quiet.
I will be picking your brain because you've got, yes. Yeah, because we are definitely trying to, get our hands around this. And that's a great example of getting the community buy-in.
Hi, Commissioner Gain. Thank you for being here. And also thank you for being at Living with Fire today. That was a very educational panel as well. My name is Patrick Chu. I am the Fire Marshal for Sparks Fire Department. Regarding the Assembly bill, how do you vet out which insurance company are allowed to eliminate the wildland fire? Because it sounds like it's based on if there can stay solvable or not, that you're going to make that determination. So I'm just curious, how do you make that determination when they file a petition in your office to say, okay, your company is allowed to eliminate wildfire, your company is not?
The short answer on that is any company can file, and right now it won't be really based on the solvency portion. Because what they have to do whenever they submit a filing to us, anything is going to have an impact on rates. They also have to submit a separate rate filing so that everything lines up. So they'll submit a change to the contract saying, this policy does not cover wildfire. Then they have, if that's going to have an impact on the overall rate, then they would submit a rate filing. That's where the solvency aspect comes in. Because as I was saying earlier, for many, many, many years, the vast majority of modern insurance history, wildfire was just fire. There was no difference between, like I said, the toaster fire or the wildfire. Carriers have only started adjusting rates and looking at how much of their premium needs to go towards the wildfire risk. Currently, if somebody carves out wildfire, it's going to have a minuscule effect on the overall premium. It's just going to be a few dollars. So it's not really going to be a solvency issue at this point. Where it can become a solvency issue is as we move along through this process. When you start getting carriers that completely offer nothing but a standalone wildfire policy, like a standalone earthquake, that's when they're going to get into the nitty gritty of how much do we actually have to charge for this risk. But right now, it's not really going to be much of an impact.
Hi, one more
Hold on
question
one
right here.
second. We
Go
have
ahead.
one more, and then we're going to go online for questions.
Okay.
Hi, Veronica Cortez, proud resident of Sun Valley, also sitting on the cab out there. You say a lot of, oh, it's legislation, it's legislation. Do you have somebody in there working for this? Or is this something you will do in the upcoming year when elections are, and we're looking for somebody to get in that seat to help us with that?
Okay, what we will be doing is I am already in conversation with the department that I report up to, which is the Department of Business and Industry. So we are having these conversations of what do we need to look at from a legislative perspective. And then the way it works with our system is each department is given so many bills that they can run or that they can request. So that would be part of the process. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't still, off to the side, find somebody that's interested in running one of these bills.
All right. Alex, we'll go to the questions online. And I just want to remind everyone too, if you weren't able to ask your question today and it's not pertaining directly to the commissioner, you can always reach out to Washoe 311 to get your question answered. Alex?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. So one question that came in online was someone who had provided an example that they received a letter from their insurer noting that one of the adjustments that was mentioned was the wildfire zone. However, in putting their address into the link that was provided, they found that they weren't in the wildfire zone, but that was listed as one of the cancellation reasons. Is that a common practice for insurers to be pushing for that if they want to opt in for wildfire insurance?
If an insurer is canceling or not canceling or non-renewing for wildfire, they have to be able to show the data behind that. It can't just be on the non-renewal notice. It can't just say high wildfire risk. They have to give specific reasons and be able to back it up with data. If they're not providing that, that's something that my office can take a look at.
Okay. The next question we have is there an understanding that wildfire coverage will work similar to how earthquake coverage works today?
That is where I think we are heading, and that's with having a standalone wildfire policy that would be very similar to how earthquake operates today. In other parts of the country, I mentioned I'm originally from Texas. There was the Texas Windstorm Association, so they cover hurricane wind risk. Florida has something very similar, so does most of the states on the East Coast. So it's not an unheard of concept over time as insurance has adapted and the risk has changed. It's something that's been created over time, and I think that's ultimately where we will end up. Is wildfire will become a completely separate policy. There will still be some carriers that decide they want to incorporate it into their homeowners, because just like today with earthquake, some carriers still offer it as an endorsement.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, we had a few questions that came in. You had noted earlier that insurers aren't able to pull out of specific zip codes unless they decide to pull from the state entirely. Is that correct?
Right. If they decide that they're going to not cover wildfire on their homeowner's policy, they have to do it for the entire state because their policies are sold statewide. They don't sell them just in very limited areas.
Okay. Another individual mentioned that most of their home is abutted by Forest Service and BLM land. Are those agencies held to the same standards as private homeowners when it comes to either insurance or the WUI code?
From the state perspective, no. I have zero jurisdiction over BLM land, and the state as a whole has no jurisdiction over them.
Okay.
Now, they are coming to the conversation. I do want to stress that they're not just ignoring the problem.
All right. Another question, how do we know if insurers are using captive agents? I guess that was mentioned earlier.
A captive agent, it does typically going to be some of your larger carriers, State Farm, Allstate, Farmers. They use the captive agent model where they're only selling that one specific brand of insurance. You will most likely know that when you go in because the agency is going to have the brand name on their advertising. It'll be above on the marquee, whereas an independent agent is not going to have a single insurer listed.
Okay.
And the easy way is just ask.
Okay.
And a quick Google search for independent agents will bring up a list as well.
Thank you. Another question, can the state of Nevada legally require insurance companies to recognize the Firewise seal on neighborhoods rather than leaving up to a corporate decision?
Under current law, no, we cannot require them.
Okay. If possible, can you and are you willing to share the names of the insurance providers you were successful with obtaining insurance for your property?
Yes, it was Mercury Insurance.
Mercury Insurance. Thank you. One person asked, a lot of these questions are from HOAs. As you respond, can you clarify how this does or doesn't apply to homeowners who don't live in HOAs? Is there a big difference?
It applies the same across the board.
Okay. Another individual asked, dropping wildfire coverage seems different than dropping or not covering entirely because of wildfire risk. Is that correct?
Right, because what they're doing is they're saying they're not covering that particular risk any longer. And the idea behind the bill, again, I wasn't here as this was moving through, but the idea behind it was people were losing their coverage for everything. And by allowing the carve out on the wildfire, it let people keep their homeowner's insurance for all of the other perils that they're insured against. You're much more likely to incur a water damage claim than a wildfire claim. Now, the wildfire risk is real, but statistically, and this is proven out, you're much more likely to suffer a water, rats in your attic, something along those lines, a tree falling on your house, those happen much more often. They're lower severity claims, but if you lose your policy entirely, you're not covered against anything. So that was the idea behind the carve out in the original bill.
Okay. An individual, and I believe this is directed more towards TMFPD. They're having a difficult time finding specific products approved for WUI standards to address home hardening. For example, eaves, soffit, enclosure panels, ember-resistant materials, ceiling for garage doors. Where can they find and source specific products for home hardening?
We got some of the mitigation specialists in the audience, but from Truckee Meadows standpoint, we help train contractors through living with fires. It's a defensible space and home hardening professional training. We do it every single year, and it's just about a week-long class where we go through and the fire protection district, but also the UNR folks with a lot of subject matter experts go over all of those fire concerns, the special products concerns. They have the connection to the products and the services to install them. And so we really want to just give them the information and the fire background and why they're doing what they're doing in the areas that are at high risk. And then, so there's a list on the UNR website that is, if you're interested in vents, siting, anything, you find that list. It's under the resources link, and the first link on there is defensible space and home hardening professionals. And it's a list of 100 different contractors. You kind of have to parse out which one will provide you the service you want, but and where you are, depending on if you're Tahoe or down in the valley. But you can find somebody to install it. I promise you there.
Okay, and one more additional question for the fire representative. You had mentioned what constitutes a level 4 versus 6 and so on. You'd mentioned how close fire stations or fire hydrants are. Is there an online resource or a document that outlines or says that? And you had also mentioned the area of Cold Springs being an outdated overlay map. How do they find that map online so they can determine what area they're in?
So it's a publicly available map. If you go to the Washoe Regional Mapping System, you can find your parcel. And in one of the links on the left, you have to find the map layer, and it's the fire hazard severity layer. And you can click on it, and it'll put a blue, green, red, and yellow color on your parcel, because your parcel in this outdated map, and again, we know it's outdated. It's about 20-year-old data that it only has to be it only has to be looked at every 3 years is how the code reads. And so it hasn't been looked at in a while. We're trying to fix that, but it's you're in a low, moderate, higher, extreme hazard. And so based on the color, it's a key there. Just find your parcel and find your, what color you're at. The ISO scoring is a separate thing, and that's handled through insurance. We meet with them every year, and they go through our ISO scoring. There's a lot that goes into it that I don't know enough about to speak knowledgeably. I just know that Truckee Meadows is a very high-rated fire department. The only ones that are higher are like the city of Los Angeles and like those kinds of places that have a much more robust tech space and fire department that's a couple minutes down the road. So it depends on how close you are to water, how close you are to how far of a response time we have, what that response time standard is for your area. All is in NFPA and gets really into the weeds. So that probably doesn't answer the question, but again, I don't want to speak out of turn on that.
Perfect. Those are the questions I have for fire. I do have 2 more questions.
Wait, hold on, Alex. I just want to jump on top of Brett's answer because the city of Reno did just finish their CWPP, and on their Reno Fire website, you can find their mapping, which is beautiful, and we'll be building on top of that as we move forward. But that is out there, and they did just finish theirs.
Perfect. For the insurance commissioner, one of the questions is, if the industry does go towards splitting out wildfire insurance, do you see that being more cost effective for consumers? The idea being insurers who do only wildfire policies would be better equipped to calculate risk and mediation efforts.
I'm going to put that remains to be seen. And initially, I think it will be more cost effective because typically when you have a carrier that does just a single line of insurance, they get to perfect it and they know exactly what the risk is and how to price it accordingly. When you're pricing out the whole homeowner's policy, you're having to take, you have the water risk, you have your liability risk of somebody falling on your property, you have your dog bite risk, you have all these different risks that they have to conglomerate into a single policy. So having just a single one peril policy, it is going to enable them to price it more accurately is the most important part because you want it to be accurate. But because it's more accurate, in the long run, it should be more cost effective.
Okay. So we're actually going to leave that as the last question. I did want to note that there was someone who asked for the commish email address again so that they could send.
iCommish, so letter I, COMMISH at doi.nv.gov.
Perfect. Any other questions we'll send directly to you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Brett. How about a round of applause for them and for yourselves? Learning about defensible space can be overwhelming. There's a lot to do. And I just want to say, if you're going to take an actionable item, start with something small, baby steps. We don't have to do everything all at once. So that being said, just a reminder, if you feel more comfortable, sending your questions that you were not able to ask today to Washoe 311, please do that. There are also printouts of Brett's presentation. We didn't realize it would be so small. So it is in the back if you need that as a take home for information or your scrapbook. I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful night and drive safe.